It is my pleasure to welcome a great client, Curt Moe, back to the show. You heard his interview before, and I got so many positive comments on it. The great thing about Curt's story is he didn't start with a lot. His story is just super relatable and showing how anyone can just do this, even if you don't have a bunch of capital to start with, a bunch of resources. Curt, like me, came from humble beginnings. It's just amazing what you can do over a little bit of time and persistence. It's just awesome. And Curt is now up to 6 properties. Last time he was on the show, he had 3 properties. And he was kind enough to come back on because he just fired another property manager. And he is now self-managing 2 of the properties in his portfolio. They're in Memphis. So we're going to talk all about that today. Curt, welcome back. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Appreciate you having me back.
It's good to have you. And you are self managing from a distance. How long have you been self managing the one property, the first one? And then now you've got 2 under self management.
Yeah, that one I did as a house hack where just for to catch people up. That's where you buy a house as a primary residence and you have to legally one of the papers you sign is the intent to occupy, which
Right.
means you have to occupy the house and it's usually just 1 year. And
And
then
then
after
that
that year
gets you the good financing. That's the point of
you get a
house.
little bit better interest. Yep.
And
And so I
lower
did
down
that.
payment. Yeah.
Yep. So I did an FHA loan, low down payment, and lived in there for 18 months, fixed it up a little bit, and then rented it out. So it's been about 4 or 5 years that I've been self-managing that one.
Mhm.
Really, I mean, tenant-wise, no issues. Have I had issues with the house, branches falling on the roof, pipes bursting in the wintertime? Of course. But that's like, anything that comes up in life, you just slowly work through it.
Well, don't say, of course. We'd hope a pipe wouldn't burst or a branch wouldn't fall on the house. But,
Yeah.
stuff happens once in a while. Did you file insurance claims for those things?
That's a good thing. You always talk about there's ways to make money with insurance, and all the quotes I was getting on the house did not meet my deductible.
Mhm.
Talked to Sarah, my investment counselor, and she's like, just talk to your insurance. I talked to them, they sent an adjuster out, and his quote or his estimate was above my deductible.
Mhm.
So, I profited $800 on that.
So, what you mean by this is that your insurance company will pay a certain amount of money, usually according to the adjuster and what they
Yep.
say, but then you, being scrappy, can get it done for less money, right?
Yep.
That's what you're saying.
Yep.
And
100%.
and the difference is money you can just collect and pocket. It's great.
Yep.
There are lots of ways actually to profit from insurance totally legally. We're not talking about
Yep.
doing anything wrong here. I have profited from that many times on roof claims on roofs that, in 2 years, I would have replaced those roofs anyway. Right. But the insurance company ended up, paying for them a lot of times. So it's really amazing. And to have that privilege of being able to have these sort of different revenue streams that a lot of people don't think about, like maybe an insurance claim, you have to own the asset. That's the only way you get to do that, right? It can't be owning the note or, the mortgage on it or being a hard money lender. You got to own the physical asset. It has a little more responsibility owning the physical asset, obviously much better returns, but also
Mhm.
these little hidden privileges that a lot of people don't realize. So, folks, look, you're paying for insurance. When something happens, file an insurance claim. They could deny the claim, maybe argue with them after they deny it and they agree to pay something or they agree to pay it all, but it doesn't hurt to just file it and let them come back to you. Maybe back up a little bit. What attracted you to self-management in the first place?
Really, nothing except that you had Drew Baker on, a handful of times, and he
Right.
just made it sound not the catastrophe most of us think it's going to be,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know. And so with that one, that was like my dipping my toe in the water. And even with the recent property manager that I fired, they weren't necessarily doing anything wrong. It was a conversation with myself. And as you often say, what's the most important conversation? The one with you have with yourself.
Right.
And we have that, when we're trying something new, or even, I already did self-management, even when we're expanding our skills, there's that internal or mental hesitation. And kind of just over the last month, I was like, look, Curt, you can do it. Whatever's going to happen, you'll be able to work through it. And then I still have, 4 other houses under management, and I'm managing 2. So we'll go at one house at a time.
That's awesome. And Curt, you have a support team here. Everybody
Yep.
listening, if they're one of our clients, they have us as their support team. So folks, just do it. Look, the way to learn the thing is to do the thing. So whatever it is in life, textbooks and school and all of that stuff, it's fine, but you're never going to gain the confidence and really internally know you can do it and really just internally learn the thing unless you do the thing. Life is on the job training. Okay. So, just go for it. And you can always go back, right? Like if it's terrible and you don't like it, and if it's a disaster, just hire a property manager the same day.
And on that thing of doing it, I mentioned this in the last interview, but people need to know that I listened to your podcast for 10 years before I bought that first house.
Right.
And that was torture, because
Torture.
I'm listening to you. I wanted to do it, but I just didn't have everything right, in my head yet. And I had a bunch of consumer debt, credit cards, student loans, and I just wasn't in the position yet, in my head and financially, but, did it little by little.
But that shows your awesome character and persistence. You had that goal out there in the future, and, it was a long time coming. So during those 10 years that you were listening to my podcast, but not investing, what were you doing? Just paying down the credit card debt? And
not until probably 2 years before I bought the first one. I mean, I was just probably living like a lot of people listening to this or watching this. Credit card debt, you're just trying to make the payments. You're not getting your spending habits in order. I'm still just, out maybe going to parties or just spending on, junk food and just things you don't need, until it became painful enough for me to sit down and do one of those snowball calculators. Okay, how can I attack each card, each student loan, and visualize what it would look like? And look, when I first started, I remember I only had, at the end of every paycheck, like an extra $20 to throw at the debt. So meeting all the payments and like an extra $20. And I slowly downsized my life. I heard the term like voluntary poverty. It wasn't that bad, but I voluntarily really downsized my life and my expenses and my housing. So my rent was cheaper, so I could attack that. And listen, I've done that since that first house. And now that I'm at 6, this year, I've kind of been giving myself, a little bit more treats, a little bit more, eating steak a little bit more often, things like that. But we all started at a different place, and that's where I had to start. And that's how I had to keep going.
Yeah. Curt, you exhibit what I've referred to on the show over the years as financial maturity. Right. I mean, maybe you didn't exhibit it at first because you were spending your money, right? But, at some point you got the wake up call and you realized, look, I got to take care of this myself. The government's certainly not going to do it. The corporate world is totally disloyal. They'll lay anybody off in a New York minute. They don't care. And you just got to make your own security. And what you were willing to do just shows great character. You were willing to take one step back to take 2 steps forward. You were willing to delay gratification for a bigger future. And that's awesome. That is totally awesome that you did that. Yes. Were you following like the Dave Ramsey school back then or anything, because we've talked about him a lot on the show. And what most people don't realize is that, he's great to a point, but then you got to graduate from Dave Ramsey, Yeah.
Yeah. I forget who said it. Dave is great at getting you from negative to 0.0.
Right.
But to get from 0 to, wealth building and things like that, you gotta look elsewhere. Yeah. But yeah, I did kind of that, his snowball method, but I think what I eventually used and what I used to track everything, I think the website is called snowballcalculator.com or .org. It looks really old, but it's just a basic like calculator where you put all your, loan data or debt data in there, and it shows you how to do it. So
yeah, I'm looking. It's called the Debt Snowball Calculator, and so there you go. So basically, that shows you how to pay off your debts, or does it also show you how they're going to snowball if you don't pay them?
How much? Basically, it's what you owe, what your minimum payment is, and what can you afford to pay extra.
Hmm.
and then it calculates everything. So me, like I said, I'd started with $20 and it showed me that. And then I would go back into the calculator once I had, once I paid that one off and I had a little bit more money, or I got a wage increase or a bonus. And here's one quick thing on wage increases and bonuses. Everyone gets so excited at the end of the year. I'm already thinking about my plasma TV, my vacation, etc. I didn't do any of that.
Yeah.
When you get a wage increase, maybe increase your lifestyle 10%, but the other 90%, throw it into your next down payment, throw it at debt, whatever, consumer debt. That really helped accelerate things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you. And I think psychologically, though, you did allude to it a few minutes ago, you do have to reward yourself a little bit along the way, but reward yourself for doing the right thing. Most people are just rewarding themselves and they're not doing anything, right? If you get to a certain investment or savings goal, and look, I don't believe in savings, but you got to save to be able to become an investor, right? Like, that's how you do it, right? Capital formation. But do give yourself some little rewards along the way as long as you're making progress, right? Don't be totally denying yourself of everything. But then, like you said, now that you've got 6 properties, and they're all running well, and 2 of them are completely under your control now, so a third of your portfolio is self-managed, you can afford to live a little bit, right? And
Yeah.
enjoy the fruits of your labors and the fruits of your discipline and savings. Do you want to speak to that at all?
It's like you said, and my daytime job is in a contract. So I don't get paid time off.
Mhm.
And probably, I think once in the last 5 years, I actually took an actual vacation where I didn't work. But over the last maybe 9 months, it's the first time since then where I've taken time off. Because all my other previous vacations were working. I always brought my laptop. I always worked. I would maybe take 1 or 2 days off.
Mhm.
Now I can take a week off and just not have to worry about it, and that's rewarding. It's nice having going on vacation where you don't have to, open your laptop or be like, if I don't work, then I don't get paid. So,
Yeah, right.
um,
Yeah, that's fantastic. And just for the record, you're in the IT profession, right?
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Good stuff. So I think it was on the last time you were on the show, you talked about this one time where I think you were laid off from one job and you had 2 rental properties, I think at the time. Maybe you had 3. I'm not sure. Remember, you sent me a Voxer message about that. And it was so cool to hear it. Like you just felt that you were secure because you had the income from the property. And do you remember that?
I do. And I did get laid off from a job and I had 2 properties and look, I worried, of course, anyone who loses their job is going to be like, okay, there's X amount of dollars not coming in now, but you don't worry as much because
Yeah.
you got some cash flow coming in every month. And there was a similar situation last March, kind of when all those banks blew up and I'm loosely tied to that industry and I was worried.
Right.
But at that point, I had 5 houses and I
Mhm.
worried less than the previous time I was laid off and only had 2 houses. So
Right.
one thing about, building wealth this way is you can't put a price on having to worry less in those
Yeah.
situations. You can't. It's fantastic. And it's only because of, having that cash flow coming in every month.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. These properties become these little forced savings accounts. And as you know, Curt, and everybody listening probably knows, I really espouse the refi till you die philosophy. So you should be stripping equity out of your properties. But as you get to those points, maybe every 7 years or so, you do have equity in those properties on the build up phase, right? So you can always tap into that if needed, in addition to the cash flow. And so that's a great thing. Good stuff. Well, I think you said you're using the property tracker software, right? Tell us how you're using that and doing self management or managing your managers, either way.
Yeah, so here's the other thing that I think people can relate to. I do most of my property tracking right now after the year is over.
Uh huh.
So there's people that every month they put in their data, and they're really good and religious about it. That's not me.
Yeah.
Has it caused any catastrophe? Has it caused any major headaches? No, it hasn't. I have I keep everything all year long and then I enter it at the end of the year. Is there a better way to do it? Absolutely. I should be doing it every month, but this is just what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And I'm getting better. but I didn't let that fact about myself stop me from getting into this and stop me from progressing. So it's a great software tool. It's nice that I can just hand my Schedule E to the tax person and they're like, wow, this is great. So
Good stuff. And do you use the property evaluator side to evaluate deals when you're looking at them? I mean, I know those performers are right on our website, but they're not dynamic. With property evaluator, what Property Tracker has an evaluator section. You can put in your own numbers and do variables and different best case scenario, worst case scenario, medium scenario. Do you do that?
I've messed around with the tool, but I don't use it. And I go off the pro formas and then I research the area a little bit, look up, what the rents are, just make sure everything's accurate. And 6 houses later.
Yeah, that's great, man. So. And just so everybody knows, you've got 2 in Memphis,
3 in Alabama,
yeah,
and then 1 in Citrus Springs, Florida.
In Florida. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, that's great. So, what else do you want to tell people about maybe the discipline or the more tactical, practical stuff of how to decide which property to buy? You did allude to something a minute ago, which is, not doing your stuff monthly, and I don't do stuff monthly either. And I guess you're thinking you're kind of beating yourself up on that one a little bit, saying, that like you should do it every month rather than just waiting to the end of the year and doing it all then. But, perfect is the enemy of done. I mean, you're doing something, right? And you don't have to be perfect at this, So I think that's an important thing too.
That makes me think of one thing my therapist says. He said, if you want to be instantly happier, lower your expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lower your expectations.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good
but no, that's a good point. Look, after the first one, even before the first one, we all want to be, as Morgan Housel says in Psychology of Money, which I know you read recently.
I love
he
that.
Says most people don't want to be wealthy. They want to feel what it's like to be wealthy.
Right.
And often we want that grand slam. And so we don't start doing anything because we want that grand slam. We want to, reverse time and go back into Bitcoin when it was $600.
Or, hey, I learned about it when it was $74. Okay. So,
yeah. And that's the thing. Those are the stories that are glamorized. And those are the stories we hear in the media. What we won't hear, but I wish we would, and we can discipline ourselves to seek out those stories, is the slow wealth. Mm-hmm. Is the people that, I think you just had a guy on recently, build wealth 1 house at a time. Mm-hmm. That's the opportunity that is out there for most common people. Most people aren't going to have the Uber idea, the Airbnb, or the Facebook idea. So instead of spending your time thinking about how to do that, buy a house. See how that changes your life. Roll all your profits into the next down payment. Buy a second house a year or 2 years later. And one thing I love thinking about is, I got 6 now and it's great. And this has taken a while, but in 10 years, if I keep up the same pace, it's going to be 16. Yeah. Another 10 years, 26. Yeah. But it's probably going to be more than that because, once that exponential growth starts to hit, things really get crazy in a good and fun way. So
you nailed it. What happens is you build a flywheel. Like Jim Collins talks about it in the book Good to Great, which is, a famous management book. It's not necessarily one I'm recommending, but the hardest part is the beginning when you're trying to move that heavy flywheel. But once you get it going, it's not totally a perpetual motion machine because that doesn't exist, but it's close. These properties start buying themselves. The last one buys the next one, and then you're in orbit, forever. So it's just a great thing. And it's great that you can see that. Everybody wants the rewards right away, but they're not willing to sacrifice and put in the work and put in the money and put in the time. It's great that you see that. It's like a farmer, you can't like rush that very much, right? Of course, there's little things you can do to turn the knobs on the science, but mostly you got to plant the seeds and just wait for the plants to grow and wait for the crops to grow, and then you harvest them. And most people just can't do that. They got to have like instant gratification. Those are the stories we hear about these home runs, but mostly life is just base hits, and it's a lot of strikes. A lot of stuff doesn't work. And I was talking about that yesterday. I was in Jacksonville and I did a hot seat with a mastermind group that I'm in. And I talked about that. I think back to all the times during my career, whether it be investing or business or both, all the people that have ripped me off, all the things that have just gone badly, all the bad decisions. But Curt, There's so much power and wisdom in just the one idea of momentum,
Yep.
just going in the right direction consistently. That overcomes anything. It's just no
100%.
matter what life throws at you, just momentum and sticking with it. It's
Hmm.
incredibly powerful, isn't it? Yeah.
It is. We want to think what it's going to be, what it'd be like to be a billionaire. For me, it's fun to think like, hey, what is 10 years from now when I have 16 houses, maybe 17 or 18,
Yeah.
what is going to be like?
Right.
I know, the things we talked about previously, if I still have a job at that point, if I get fired or lose it, I'm not going to care at all,
Yeah. Right.
at all. There will be no worry.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
In terms of mindset, we've talked a bit about your mindset today, and I think your mindset is really good. Are there any influences you've had, any great mentors, books, audio programs, things like that have really helped, like not with how to invest in real estate, but your mindset, which is so important?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I read a stat somewhere that said 50% of people don't have good childhoods. I'm one of them.
Yep.
And there's also another saying is you treat other people and you treat yourself how your parents treated you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you grew up in an abusive household, emotionally, physically, etc., you internalize that and that becomes your inner voice. And so
Mm-hmm.
that for me, that's something I had to deal with. And lots of therapy, lots of reading. I love, what we talked about earlier. You said, the most important conversation is one you have with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
What he says is if there's anything worth studying, it's your childhood and how it
Mm-hmm.
affects you now. Anyone who says, oh, you just get over it,
Yeah.
that's someone who's likely stuck in there and they just don't know it.
Right.
So there's so many people that I know can relate with me. You have that inner critic. You look yourself in the mirror and it's not positive stuff. And you go throughout your day. And as we talked about earlier, there's a lot of I should have done this, I should have done that.
Mm-hmm.
If I had done this would have happened.
Yep.
And working on yourself through, there's therapy, there's so many books. If you can just quiet that inner critic.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I was in Cartagena, Colombia, just
Mm-hmm.
a couple years ago, and I just realized it. And I said, you know what? It's just not as loud as it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
And when that's been your whole life, that's a moment that I will never forget. I have it in my Google Calendar every year and to remind myself of that moment. And there's been others since then. The mindset for me was again, it was a lot of just processing through my past. Yeah, every time I sit down to read a book or watch a video, I know that is going to have a return in value.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
Somehow.
Well, good stuff, Curt. And yeah, the mindset is just so critically important. All the how we can figure it out. And folks, there's so many resources nowadays. When I was a kid, this stuff was hidden. It wasn't
Yep.
there. There was hardly any of it. There was hardly any self-improvement movement. It was, it was a little trickle of what it is now. There's just so many sources out there, and it's just all free mostly. So take advantage of it.
Yeah.
It's just really good to take advantage of it. Well, Curt, again, thank you so much for sharing all of
Thank
your
you.
journey from 0 to 6 properties, 10 years listening to my podcast without investing, just getting ready. I remember, I think you called me or left me a message the day you bought your first property. You worked with one of our investment counselors, but you sent me a message. And at the time you said, Jason, it took me 9 years to raise my hand and get talking with your team. And now I've got my first property. And it's just so awesome to hear that. It's really great.
Thank you.
So
thanks for what you do. It truly is a service, not only the education, but, what you provide and the houses and you make it very simple. I almost don't want to say easy,
Yep.
but it's definitely simple. It does take some steps to do, but I appreciate what you do.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Curt, it's my pleasure. And hearing stories like yours, it just makes it all worthwhile. So we appreciate you. Keep up the good work. And I can't wait to have you on again when you've got 9 properties and then 15 properties. And we'll do it in the future. Okay, buddy?
Let's do it.
All right. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jason. Have a good one.